Coming up next, BookTV presents Afterwards, an hour-long program where we invite guest hosts to interview authors. This week, Pulitzer Prize winning author of Monkey Girl, Edward Humes, discusses his latest book, Ecobarents. Mr. Humes' critically acclaimed story reveals the unique efforts of a few individuals who he says are trying to help save the planet. Mr. Humes discusses his book with UCLA environmental economics professor Matthew Kahn.
Hello, I'm Matthew Kahn, and we're here today to talk about ecobarents, the dreamers, schemers, and millionaires who are saving our planet. I'm delighted to be here today with Edward Humes. Edward, welcome.
Thank you very much.
And so to start right out, why did you write this book?
Well, I think I share this with a lot of people I know, that the news about our environment, about the various crises we face, from global warming to dying oceans and fossil fuel dependence, has become overwhelming and even paralyzing. And I don't know if you saw An Inconvenient Truth. I sort of walk out of it with my shoulders slumped and my head down and wondering what's going to happen to my kids. That evolved into an idea to tell the story of a number of individuals that I'm calling ecobarents, because you may not have heard of them, but their work is very important in the area of climate and green transportation, conservation, other environmental causes. They're both having a great impact and setting an example for those of us who may worry about the idea, there's nothing we can do at this point. Here's people who are really rolling up their sleeves and doing something substantial.
The book has three types of ecobarents. There's dreamers, there's schemers, and there's millionaires. So I know who millionaires are. Let's start with the dreamers and the schemers. Can you define the dreamers and schemers and give some examples of each?
Well, there's some overlap, I think, and there's some I'd put in the category of all three. The schemers I had in mind when I chose that word for somebody, the folks at the Center for Biological Diversity, and this is a not very well known environmental organization based in Tucson. They have offices around the country, but their work is ubiquitous, and people probably have heard of their work, if not the name of the organization. One very high-profile cause they were involved in led to the protection under the Endangered Species Act for the polar bear, and for the somewhat reluctant finding by the Bush administration towards the end of President Bush's presidency, was the finding that the cause of the extinction threat for polar bears was global warming. And this was a very pivotal moment, because it means that if the law is followed, the country needs to begin taking some very firm steps about climate change in order to preserve the lives of species like the polar bear threatened with extinction. So it was a big turning point, in a way, in the debate about climate change and what we should do about it. We're still hashing out what it's going to lead to, but the Center for Biological Diversity, going back 20 years, was just two guys out in the national forest in New Mexico hooting like owls. That was their job. They were the owl hooters, and the reason they did that was because if a rare owl called the Mexican spotted owl was detected, if they responded to their calls, then that area of the national forest couldn't be logged. And that's how they got their start, and they got their start in activism when they found the owls, and the government said, we're going to cut those trees anyway, and that ended their employment with the federal government, because they went public with this information, and began their career as activists with a nonprofit organization. But the result of their work was they became the first people to systematically use the Endangered Species Act in order to actually protect endangered species. This was one of those 70s era laws that gave any citizen in the country the power to intervene in an action by the federal government that might hurt an endangered species. Anyone has standing. But nobody was taking advantage of that till these owl hooters came along. And they've turned that into a model that has protected over 100 million acres of important habitat throughout the United States, as well as several hundred species that otherwise might have been extinct.
So turning to the millionaires, A knee-jerk reaction would be that a millionaire can afford three of the American dream: 5 Hummers, 5 jets, and a huge McMansion. Can a millionaire be an eco-baron?
Well, there's a history of ecological and conservation philanthropy that goes back, a century in this country. Look at Rockefeller, who, among other things, donated the land for Grand Tetons National Park. He was pilloried for doing so. There was a lot of opposition to that. We can talk about the backlash to this philanthropy later, but there's an American tradition for this kind of altruistic behavior by people who can afford it. Doug Tompkins is the fellow you first meet if you read ecobarents, and he was an outdoorsman, a mountain climber, but he founded several very successful businesses. First the North Face, and then where he really made his money because he sold the North Face early on, Esprit, a dominant fashion company of the 70s and 80s. He was unfulfilled by the lifestyle that gave him. Which was exactly as you described. He could afford anything he wanted. He was a multi-millionaire, but what he really wanted to do was, it turned out, move to Patagonia, to Chile, and to begin protecting, buying, and ultimately giving away in the form of parks and wildlife preserves, very important areas, ecologically speaking, important areas of the temperate rainforest in Patagonia. And he's given away many millions of dollars. Over 2 million acres have been purchased for preservation alone.
How big is that roughly?
How big is 2 million? Well, he's created 11 different parks and preserves with this. He and his wife, Chris Tompkins. And one of the signature parks is of the scale of Yosemite Park here. And in terms of its ecological importance, certainly it's equal. These are regions that have the last remaining stands of a certain kind of tree called the alerce, which is a very old, lives for thousands of years, but has been logged throughout most of the region. So he's protected important areas, and they are habitats for species that are on the brink of extinction as well.
Edward, something fascinating that you do early on in the book is, and I will ask my question, is he a hero in Chile for his efforts?
Well, for some, and that gets back to this backlash idea. Rockefeller was burned in effigy in Wyoming for saying, I'm going to give this land away to make a national park. They were up in arms over that. Of course, now if you tried to take it away from them, they'd react similarly. And that's the arc of Tompkins' story, because first he was welcomed. Chile is one of the most wide-open free market economies there is. In fact, Ronald Reagan used to call it the Chilean miracle. And all comers were welcome to invest, to buy up land and extract its resources, log its trees, whatever you want, develop, build. And Doug Tompkins comes along and begins buying up real estate that was just sitting on the market. He's getting a good deal. And this is what really roped him in. As he puts it, I could go down there and buy an area of land the size of San Francisco for the price of condo in San Francisco. And I'm really getting my bang for the buck here, because this is irreplaceable landscape. But when he made it clear that, no, I'm not going to cut the trees down, I'm not going to extract the resources, I'm just going to keep it like it is. And in fact, I'm going to restore the natural areas, and I'm going to not develop the area. That's when they started getting suspicious. And you're going to give this away? That's your bottom line? And there was no history of that kind of philanthropy in that part of the world, conservation philanthropy. And so the rumors began, oh, he must be a CIA spy. Which in that part of the world wasn't that crazy an idea. Or no, then they really got nutty. He was going to build a tunnel through the Andes so the Argentine army could invade, which Chileans have always worried about. It's one of their cross-border conflicts that has bedeviled that region for a long time. Or my personal favorite was he's starting a second Israel, a new homeland for the Jewish people in the rainforests of Patagonia, and just one crazy thing after another. Military helicopters were buzzing his farm, his ranch where he was living, and there were investigations in the Chilean Senate, and finally they started threatening him with deportation, all because he wanted to buy this land up and give it away. At the same time, there was another company buying land in Tierra del Fuego, somewhat to the south of him, similarly large parcels with the intention of clear cutting them, and that was fine. and he was kind of, you just think about it. All I want to do is buy this land and give it away for parks, and I'm the one they want to deport.